Meet the amp that almost nobody talks about, but that has graced countless backlines of many famous artists. Hey everyone, welcome to our next episode of Storytime. This time we're talking about the Fender Dual Showman, which is basically the unsung hero of a lot of great records from the 60s, 70s and 80s. It has come to my attention that about 70% of our audience haven't yet subscribed to our channel. So if you enjoy what we're doing here and would like to support us, please give us a sub, that helps a lot. Let's move on to the video. It is actually quite incredible how many of the big names have used this amp, and it's quite a bit surprising why this amp so rarely gets any mention at all as being one of the most used amp on the big stages by the big acts. So just to name a couple of names who have used it over the years: Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, Keith Richards, the Beatles, Gilmour, John Frusciante, a lot of other guys who I'm definitely forgetting about at this point. I think even David Gilmour used a preamp. His alembic preamp was actually based on a Dual Showman, and for some time he used actually a Dual Showman. So it's like literally the biggest guys. Yeah, right, Pete Townsend, of course, The Who. The biggest acts of the 70s and 60s have used this amp, and I'm not sure why it is the case that it gets less mention than the other black panel amps, which usually were in the combo format. But it might have to do with the fact that most of those big acts use this as one of their amps. It's seldom been like just one amp on its own. It's usually been combined with a couple or at least one other amp. So it's been at least a dual amp setup. And those Showmans are perfectly made for this dual amp setup, as it is quite similar to a Twin Reverb. And we all know that Twin Reverbs are one of the best amps to match with other amps in a dual amp setup, and the same goes for the Showmans, and that's one of the main reasons why the big acts used it in conjunction with some other amplifiers. So in case, for example, for Jimi Hendrix, he combined it with his Marshalls. The same goes for Jimmy Page. Then when we look at David Gilmour, he combined that with his high watts. The Beatles, of course, they used also Vox amps. And you know, it's always been a dual amp or multi-amp setup. For example, John Frusciante used this amp together with his Silver Jubilee and Marshall Major. This amp has seen a lot of stages and has been behind a lot of great players, and it has been used in basically any of the classic genres. Despite it being very similar to a Twin Reverb, it has some differences. It is less scooped in the mids than a Twin Reverb, which also means that it is a better fit for humbucker guitars, which tend to sound a bit flat with a Twin Reverb, which is not the case with this amp. So it is a more flat frequency response, and it has still the same power of a Twin, just with a different character. The vibrato channel on this amp has also a bit less gain than on the Twin because of the reverb driver tube that is an additional gain stage in the Twin. You get more gain out of that model. The normal channel on the Dual Showman has a lot of gain on tap, so you can get some really mean sounds out of it, while the vibrato channel is a perfect match for some beautiful clean and edge of breakup sounds. The control layout is the same or identical as on a Twin, apart from the missing reverb, of course, but everything else is the same. And one of the big strengths of this amp is on the vibrato channel, you can dial it in for some fantastic edge of breakup sounds. So volume-wise, if you're playing with a single coil guitar, if you even dime it to 7, 8 or 9, it's still rather something I would call edge of breakup. It's approaching a crunch level, but it's still not there yet. But yeah, about 7 or 8 is a nice edge of breakup sound for a single coil guitar. And on the treble, from about 5, the treble knob starts to kick in. Let's say about 5.5 or 6, you're starting to find a sweet spot for single coil pickup. The mids knob is not very active in the middle range of its travel. It gets a bit too MIDI above 7, and towards the other spectrum you can scoop out the sound to your liking, but somewhere about 5 or 6 is the usual middle ground that sounds great with those amps. As these amps are really massive, they have a lot of low-end response, so be careful with the bass. Something about 2 or 3 on the dial is enough for the usual setting. And for a single coil guitar, for a Strat for example, about 3 would be a good place to start. Effects wise, this amp has a tremolo on board, which has the speed and intensity controls. It is the optical style tremolo, which means it is a bit more choppy than the bias tremolo types. That can sound great for a quicker tremolo speed. You don't lose the intensity of the tremolo when you're at higher speeds. Along with the Twin Reverb, this is Fender's biggest amp for guitar from the Blackface era. So there's nothing that is more powerful for guitar specifically from Fender in that era. And it features 4 6L6 tubes. It is a monster of an amp with a lot of headroom, beautiful for cleans. It has a really classic Blackface vibe going on. And I would recommend it to anyone who wants to check out some pedal sounds, who's looking for a good pedal platform, or who's looking for an amp to, exactly as the big iconic guitarists did it, for anyone who's looking for an amp to combine it with something else. Why that works so well with this one and with the Twin Reverb is that it has a very unique place in the frequency bandwidth. It has its own thing going on that nothing else does just like that. And if you combine it with something that has a very different footing frequency-wise, for example, a Vox amp, that's a match made in heaven. There's not many better combinations you could imagine for dual amp setups. So this particular amp that I got is a European version, which is, you folks who are in Europe have probably seen the backsides of those black panel amps. They have this red switch here, that's a voltage selector. You get that only with the export models, and yeah, this is one of those. So on a quad of 6L6 tubes, that's a lot of really clean and punchy power that you get from this amp. So it doesn't have a lot of preamp gain. It has only 4 preamp tubes for both channels, and one of the tubes is obviously for the phase inverter. So there's not a lot of gain going on the front end. So you have a massive headroom, and this amp is just beautiful for some of the best cleans you can get. This amp has a bright switch on both channels. The bright switch, as with all of those types of designs, it works actually only while you're still in the clean or edge breakup territory. Once you get the volume really high up, above 5, 6, 7, it loses gradually its effect. So basically, this is something that will have a huge effect while you're in the cleaner range, and it will disappear when you're really cranking the amp. But it is a nice way to sculpt some of the tone, because it not only makes the sound brighter, you can compensate that by reducing the treble control, but it actually also scoops out some of the mid-range. It makes a very different EQ curve for the whole amp. You can use that to your advantage to get simply different tonal effects on the amp. So I'm really looking forward to doing some dual amp captures with this amp in the future, especially for some Jimi Hendrix and Jimmy Page tones, because those are for me the big idols, and I'm very convinced that this amp is a big part of the picture, especially for some of the Hendrix live recordings and some of the Led Zeppelin stuff, and the stuff that happens frequency-wise when you combine or mix 2 amps together. It's a very specific, unique and powerful way how to get a punchier, more dynamic and sustaining sound, and that's a story for another day. It's really fascinating how 2 amps interact when they're matched. So I'm really looking forward to that. Just to demonstrate how this type of tremolo, the optic tremolo, sounds, here's a small sound bite with me playing some random lick on a Strat. Okay, thanks for tuning in today's episode on the Dual Showman amp. It's really a wonderful tool to have in your arsenal. Fabian will play us out on some captures we did of this wonderful amp. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and see you around.